Have you ever smiled at someone who was quietly planning your destruction? Have you ever held their hand, kissed their cheek, and said, "Good night," while your heart was already building a case against them? That's exactly where I was. And by the time he finally whispered those 4 words, I had been ready for months. My name is Amara. I'm 31 years old, and until 8 months ago, I believed I was the luckiest woman alive. I had a career I loved as a senior marketing consultant, a beautiful condo I owned outright, and a fiancé named Leo who made everyone around him feel like they were standing in sunlight. Leo was charming in that effortless way that makes people trust you before you've even earned it. Tall, well-dressed, always the funniest person in the room. We met at a friend's rooftop dinner 3 years ago. He spilled wine on my white dress and spent the rest of the night apologizing with the most genuine eyes I'd ever seen. I fell for him slowly at first, then completely. When he proposed on a quiet Tuesday evening with my grandmother's ring style replicated in gold and emerald, I said yes before he finished the sentence. I thought I knew him. I thought love like ours didn't crack. I was wrong, but I wasn't blind. And that difference is what saved me. Started with a phone. Not a dramatic discovery, just a small, strange shift. Leo had always been the kind of person who left his phone face up on the counter, never cared if I saw his screen, sometimes even handed it to me to show me something funny. Then one Thursday in January that changed. I walked into the kitchen while he was texting and he clicked the screen off faster than felt natural. I didn't say anything. I just noted it. The next week, I noticed he'd changed his passcode. I knew because I once used his phone to check a restaurant number and it rejected my touch. He laughed it off. My fingers reset it by accident and kissed my forehead before I could ask anything else. That forehead kiss. I would come to hate that forehead kiss. It was his reset button. Whenever I got too close to the truth, out came the kiss and I was supposed to go soft and forget. For a while I did. But something in my gut, that quiet, stubborn instinct women are taught to ignore, refused to be kissed away. I didn't say anything yet. I just started paying closer attention. Not out of paranoia. Out of love, and what love does when it starts to feel the ground shift beneath it. 6 weeks after the phone incident, Leo told me he had a team dinner on a Friday night. I packed a small overnight bag, told him I was visiting my cousin Priya, and drove across town to actually have dinner with her. Over pasta, I mentioned the team dinner casually and asked if she knew anyone at Leo's company. She didn't, but she suggested I text Kwame, a mutual friend who worked in Leo's building. I did. Kwame's response came back in minutes. Team dinner? We haven't done one of those in months. Budget cuts. I stared at that message for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't call Leo. I just saved the screenshot, drove back to Priya's, and sat on her couch in the dark for a while. She asked me what was wrong. I said nothing yet. When Leo came home that night smelling like a perfume I'd known, he kissed my cheek and said the food was terrible. I smiled and said I was glad he was home. That night I created a private folder on my laptop. I called it Admin. It was the most important folder I would ever make. 3 weeks later, Leo became suddenly suspiciously sweet. Flowers on a Wednesday. Takeout from my favorite Senegalese place on a Thursday. He suggested we upgrade my engagement ring, something more elegant, he said, pulling up jewelry websites and pointing at diamond bands that cost more than most people's cars. I smiled and said I'd think about it. But later that night, while he slept, I searched the jeweler's name he'd mentioned when he first gave me my ring. I remembered the story vividly. He'd said he'd saved for 4 months, chosen it himself, had it engraved specially. But the receipt I found in an old email thread told a different story. The ring had been purchased 11 days before he met me, originally sized for someone with a smaller finger than mine. It had been resized. The engraving had been added later, separately billed. He didn't save 4 months for me. He repurposed something that was already there. I sat with that information like a stone in my chest. I didn't confront him. I photographed the email thread, saved it to the folder, and closed my laptop. I let him bring me coffee the next morning. I let him call me his favorite person. I smiled. And I waited. One Tuesday afternoon, I stopped at a cafe near our neighborhood to work on a client proposal. I ordered my usual and settled by the window, laptop open. 20 minutes later, I looked up and saw Leo across the street. He was with a woman in a cream-colored coat. They were laughing, not politely, not professionally, laughing the way two people laugh when they've forgotten the rest of the world exists. He leaned in close and touched her hand like it belonged to him. She tilted her face up toward his and he kissed her forehead. That kiss. I didn't move. I didn't gasp. My hands were completely steady as I raised my phone and took 3 photos through the glass. One of his hand over hers. One of them standing together. One of that forehead kiss. Then I went back to my proposal. I finished it by 4 o'clock. I sent it to the client by 4:15. When Leo texted at 5 saying he was on his way home and asking what I wanted for dinner, I told him I was craving pasta. He brought home the exact kind I liked. I ate every bite. Later, zooming into my photos, I recognized the woman in the cream coat. My stomach turned slowly like something curdling. I knew her face. Her name was Isla. She was an event coordinator helping us plan our wedding venue, polished, professional, quick with a smile that never quite reached her eyes when she looked at me. I had liked her at first. She was efficient, detail-oriented, and Leo had personally recommended her after meeting her at a colleague's event. I remembered thinking how helpful it was that he'd found someone so capable. Now I was rethinking every meeting, every site visit, every moment she'd been in our lives. I replayed conversations I'd half forgotten. The way she always addressed emails to Leo directly, even when I'd initiated the thread. The time Leo snapped, genuinely snapped, which was rare for him, when I suggested we look at a different coordinator because Isla's fee had gone up. He'd said she understood his vision. The time I let it go. Now I was letting nothing go. I opened our shared wedding planning account that evening while Leo showered. I found a transfer I hadn't approved, $400 to a vendor I didn't recognize. I cross-checked the date. Matched a Saturday 2 months ago when Leo said he was playing football with friends. I took a screenshot. Put it in the folder. Then I heard the shower turn off and went to pour 2 glasses of water like everything was fine. I spent the next several days carefully going through our joint wedding account. What I found made me sit very still at my desk for a long time. Small transfers, 150 here, 200 there, had been happening for nearly 5 months. Each one was timed perfectly against something Leo had told me. A vendor payment, a booking deposit, a miscellaneous expense. But when I checked the actual vendor invoices, none of these transfers appeared. The money wasn't going to florists or caterers. It was disappearing into an account I didn't recognize. In total, nearly $3,000 was gone. The amounts were small enough to miss if you weren't looking. Leo had gambled correctly that I was too busy, too trusting, too in love to look. He was right about the last part. I had been in love. But I wasn't just a woman in love. I was a marketing consultant who tracked budgets for a living. I knew how numbers moved and where they hid. I documented everything, dates, amounts, corresponding lies. I printed 2 copies and sealed one in an envelope I gave to Priya for safekeeping. Then I labeled a new section of the folder, money. I was building something. Not a fight. Case. And then I found something that turned my blood cold. Leo used a shared email address for household admin, bills, subscriptions, delivery tracking. I had access and rarely used it. On a Wednesday night, while he was watching a game in the living room, I logged in to find a delivery confirmation. Instead, buried in the drafts folder, I found a document he'd forgotten was synced there. It was a rental application. Scale building, 3-bedroom apartment on the other side of the city. Move-in date listed, 2 weeks after our wedding. Applicants listed, Leo Adeyemi and Isla Ford. I read it 3 times. Then I sat back and looked at the ceiling for a moment. This wasn't a man who made one mistake and panicked. This was a man who had mapped out an entire exit strategy while holding my hand through engagement parties and cake tastings. He was going to marry me, access whatever financial stability I provided, and leave. I wasn't his future. I was his stepping stone. I scrolled further through the email chain and found a message from Isla that made the whole room feel smaller. Once she signs, we're free. I closed the laptop. I walked into the living room. Leo was laughing at something on the television. I sat beside him, tucked my feet under me, and leaned my head on his shoulder. Kissed my hair. I closed my eyes and thought, not yet. 3 months before the wedding, Leo had brought up a prenuptial agreement. He framed it carefully, practical, modern, something every financially independent couple should have. I was hurt, but I agreed because I respected transparency. His lawyer had drafted it and mine had reviewed it briefly. But now I pulled it back out and sat with my attorney, a sharp woman named Ms. Odia, for 2 hours on a Thursday afternoon. What she walked me through made me feel briefly ill and then incredibly focused. The prenup contained clauses shielding Leo's business contributions and future marital investments, positioning him to claim shares of my condo and portions of my family trust in the event of a divorce after 2 years of marriage. It was written carefully enough to look reasonable at a glance, but designed, unmistakably designed, to protect him at my expense. Ms. Odia pointed at 3 specific paragraphs and said, "Someone thought hard about this." I thought about Leo's charm, Leo's ease, Leo's patient, unhurried smile. He had thought hard about everything. What he had not thought about was my older sister Bola, who had been a forensic accountant for 11 years and owed me a birthday favor. I told Ms. Odia I wasn't canceling the wedding. Not yet. She looked at me for a long moment and nodded slowly. For the next 3 weeks, I became the most pleasant version of myself. I attended cake tastings and smiled at every flavor. I laughed at venue tours and took careful notes. I kissed Leo goodnight and asked about his day and listened to him lie smoothly about meetings and lunches and phone calls. He mistook my calmness for innocence. Isla, who was still coordinating our wedding under the impression that I suspected nothing, mistook my warmth for weakness. She once patted my arm at a venue walkthrough and said, "You're going to be such a beautiful bride." I thanked her and meant nothing by it. While they relaxed, I was quietly doing the most important work of my life. I moved my personal savings to a new account. I had my name listed as sole authorized party on every vendor contract. I removed Leo as a beneficiary on 2 insurance policies. I secured the title on my condo with Ms. Odia's help. Bola had completed her forensic review of the financial trail and handed me a report that would make any judge sit up straight. I printed it and added it to the folder. The folder was now 47 pages. Leo once asked what I kept working on late at night. I said it was a client pitch. He said he was proud of me. I said thank you. 2 weeks before the wedding, I told Leo the first was going away for a girls' weekend with Priya. I packed a bag, kissed him, and drove to Priya's apartment, which was exactly 12 minutes from our home. The night before I left, I had installed a home security system, 3 cameras, legal, registered in my name. I told Leo it was because packages kept going missing from the lobby. He helped me set it up. He even joked that now we'd catch any package thieves. On the second night of my supposed weekend away, I watched the camera feed from Priya's couch. Leo arrived home around 9. By 9:30, Isla was there. They were in my kitchen, drinking the champagne I had been saving for our wedding morning. I watched them move through the space I had built, the apartment I had chosen, decorated, paid for, with a comfort that turned my stomach. And then I heard it through the audio. Leo laughing and saying in a loose, careless voice, "She'll still marry me. She needs the fairy tale too much." Priya reached for my hand. I didn't cry. I just watched. And then Isla asked the question I hadn't expected. "So when are you telling her about the debt?" I spent the next 2 days with Bola going through everything. The debt was worse than I imagined. Leo had 3 credit cards I didn't know about, a personal loan taken out 18 months ago, and a small business venture, a logistics company he'd quietly launched and quietly run into the ground, that had left him $46,000 in the hole. His salary looked respectable on paper, but most of it was servicing debt he'd hidden behind a lifestyle of nice shoes and expensive restaurants and generous gestures that, I now understood, he could not afford. He hadn't pursued me because we were good together. He had pursued me because I was stable. I owned property. I had savings. I had a family trust that would eventually mature. I was to Leo a solution. The engagement, the prenup, the wedding, it was all part of a plan to access what I'd built and exit before the walls closed in. And the cruelest part was that he had made me feel for 3 whole years like I was the lucky one. I sat with that for a long time. Then I thought about Diane, his mother, Patricia. And something clicked. Leo's mother, Patricia, had always been almost too warm with me. Effusive compliments, performative hugs, the kind of attention that felt more like management than affection. She once said to me over Sunday lunch, "Marriage means standing by your man through his seasons." I'd thought it was sweet at the time. Now I heard it differently. I tested her one afternoon, bringing up trust and honesty in conversation and watching her eyes carefully. She got rigid almost immediately. "Don't overthink things," she said quickly. "Men panic before weddings. It doesn't mean anything." That was not a mother speaking generally. That was a woman who knew something specific. I asked Ms. Odia to check the rental deposit on Leo and Isla's planned apartment. It had been paid in 2 installments. One from Leo. One from an account belonging to Patricia Adeyemi. His mother had helped fund the apartment he planned to share with another woman, 2 weeks after marrying me. The betrayal was no longer just Leo's. It was a family operation. I added Patricia's bank record to the folder. Bola whistled softly when she saw it. I closed the folder and made tea. There was one more chapter before the final one. 4 days before the wedding, Isla appeared at my bridal shower. She arrived under the excuse of dropping off a venue folder, dressed beautifully, smiling at everyone, moving through the room like she belonged there. Leo's aunts offered her food. My colleagues thanked her for her hard work. She accepted every compliment with the grace of a woman who had no idea the ground beneath her was already gone. I watched her from across the room. Then I walked over, took both her hands in mine, and thanked her publicly for everything she had contributed to our big day. I said I couldn't have done it without her. I said I hoped she knew how much it meant to me. She smiled her full smile, the one that finally reached her eyes because she thought she was winning. My friends thought I was being gracious. Priya, standing behind a flower arrangement, caught my eye and pressed her lips together to keep from reacting. After the shower, I drove to Ms. Odia's office. I signed the revised wedding paperwork she had prepared, the version that voided Leo's prenup protections, removed every clause he'd counted on, and transferred sole authority over the wedding fund back to me. Leo never asked to see it. Why would he? He thought I needed the fairy tale too much. Ms. Odia and I spent the final days completing every legal move. My condo title was secured fully in my name. Leo had been removed from my insurance beneficiary list. My family trust documents had been reviewed and locked. Bola had submitted a formal financial complaint regarding the missing wedding fund money, quiet, documented, properly filed. Every vendor contract for the wedding now bore my signature alone. Leo signed a revised document I told him was just updated vendor terms. He signed it without reading past the first paragraph. He was distracted, I could see it. He was thinking about the apartment, the future he'd designed, the clean exit he thought was waiting 2 weeks away. He had stopped paying attention to the details because he thought the hard part was done. That is the specific danger of underestimating someone who loves quietly. They finish their work while you are still celebrating prematurely. I slept deeply that last week. Genuinely, peacefully deeply. Not because I wasn't hurting, I was. 3 years is not nothing. But I had built something solid enough to stand on, and standing felt good. All that remained now was deciding how public I wanted his humiliation to be. I had already decided. The wedding morning was cool and golden. I had my hair done at Priya's, ate a full breakfast, and laughed with my bridesmaids like a woman completely at peace, because I was. The venue was stunning. White flowers, warm lighting, the kind of setting that makes people believe in forever. Leo arrived looking like the man I had fallen in love with. Navy suit, broad smile, easy charm. Guests settled into their seats, murmuring and smiling. Islam moved efficiently behind the scenes, earpiece in, tablet in hand, completely in her element. I watched her from the side entrance as I waited with my father. She had no idea. Leo stood at the altar, and when I walked in, his face did something I will never forget. He looked genuinely moved. Genuinely proud. He reached for my hand with the warmth of a man who had never done a single dishonest thing in his life. The officiant opened with something about love and commitment. I listened calmly. My bouquet was steady in my hands. The venue screen, set up for what Leo believed was our photo montage, glowed softly behind the altar. The remote for it was in my maid of honor Priya's hand. I turned to the officiant and said quietly but clearly, "Before we begin, I need to share something." A hush spread through the room instantly. Leo's smile flickered but held. He probably thought it was a sweet speech, a personal vow addition, a surprise tribute. He squeezed my hand. I didn't squeeze back. I nodded to Priya. The screen lit up. The first image was Leo and Isla at the cafe, his hand over hers, his face turned toward her with the ease of habit. Someone in the third row gasped. Leo's grip on my hand loosened. The next slide was the apartment lease. Both names, clear as daylight, move-in date 2 weeks post-wedding. Then the bank transfers, dated, documented, labeled. Then the debt report Bola had compiled. Then the audio transcript of Leo in my kitchen saying she'd still marry him because she needed the fairy tale. I watched his face in real time as each slide appeared. Charm fell away piece by piece like paint from a wall. He lunged toward Priya, trying to get the remote. 2 of my cousins stepped forward. He stopped. I turned back to the room and I said it clearly without a trembling voice. This wedding was supposed to celebrate trust. I will not marry a man who planned to use me, deceive me, and take from me while calling it love. I paused. You didn't lose me today, Leo. You lost me the first time you lied. I just let you keep digging. The room collapsed into sound. Leo was shouting, then begging. His composure gone completely, every layer of polish stripped away in real time. Isla began crying near the back, mascara running, trying to quietly leave, but guests were already turning, recognizing her from the photos on the screen, connecting what they'd just seen. Patricia stood up and began yelling that I was humiliating her son, which only made more people look at her and remember the lease deposit slide. I stood completely still through all of it. My hands did not shake. My voice did not crack. My father stood 2 feet behind me and said nothing because I had asked him to trust me, and he did. The officiant, bless her, simply stepped aside. Priya stood at my right, expression calm, eyes fierce with loyalty. When venue security I had pre-briefed the evening before, moved to escort Isla out, Leo spun toward me one final time with wild eyes and an outstretched hand as if I might still reach for it. I looked at him with something that wasn't hatred. It was just clarity. Kind that comes after months of quiet, careful watching. The venue deposit, the honeymoon booking, the catering balance, I said softly. It's all in your name now. Good luck. Then I turned and walked toward the garden doors with my head high. The footage from a guest's phone made it online by that evening. Within 48 hours, it had been viewed more times than I could count. I didn't watch it. I didn't need to. Leo's professional world was small and interconnected, and the combination of the video, the financial complaint Bola had filed, and the quiet conversations that followed made sure everyone who needed to know the truth eventually heard it. Isla lost 3 major clients within 2 weeks. The apartment she and Leo had planned to share fell through when he couldn't cover his portion of the deposit. The money he'd planned to pull from our wedding fund was now documented and in dispute. Patricia called me 4 times. I didn't answer once. The 5th time she called, she reached Ms. Odia instead. Leo appeared in my building lobby one rainy evening, thinner than I remembered, some of the ease finally gone from his posture. The security guard called up to ask if I wanted to come down. I said no. I sent an envelope down instead, a sealed copy of everything, including the repayment demand for the $3,000 taken from the wedding fund, filed correctly, legally, quietly. He stood in the lobby for a few minutes, the envelope in his hands. Then he left. I watched from my window without feeling anything other than relief. The storm had passed. I was still standing. Leo came to my door one final time 3 months later. He looked like a man who had spent weeks rehearsing what to say. He said he made one mistake. He said he panicked. He said he still loved me and that everything had spiraled beyond his intention. I listened to all of it, standing in my doorway, arms folded. Then I handed him a plain white envelope. Inside was a printed copy of every document from the folder. The screenshots, the transfers, the lease, the audio transcript, the debt report, the prenup clauses, all 47 pages. And beneath it all, one handwritten note. It was never one mistake. It was 100 choices. I closed the door. I blocked his number. I went back inside, made tea, and sat in the apartment I owned, in the life I had rebuilt with my own hands. Here is what I want you to take from my story. Trust your instincts, not your anxiety, but that deep, quiet knowing that speaks before fear does. Document everything when something feels wrong. Never let love make you financially careless. People who plan to use you are counting on your trust to blind you. And the most powerful thing you can do when someone underestimates you is nothing, not yet, while you build something they cannot dismantle. Leo thought he was betraying a woman in love. He never realized he was teaching her how to win. If this story hit somewhere deep, please like this video. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who need to hear it. Drop a comment below and tell me, at what point did you realize Leo was never going to come clean on his own? Share this with someone who needs the reminder that staying quiet isn't the same as staying weak. And if you're new here, subscribe. There are more stories like this one waiting for you, and I promise none of them will waste your time.